always find that little roll down countdown really quite fun. Hello, for those who are joining us, welcome. Today we're talking about, this is a LinkedIn Live on work-life integration or work-life balance. I'm joined with the amazing Anna Lundberg, who's who's a performance coach who helps individuals and teams unlock their full potential at work without personal sacrifice. Love that. She is also the author of Outside the 9 to 5 book, which I've got here, my own copy, which is nice, and the host of Reimagining Success podcast. She's also a good friend of mine, a fellow mastermind companion in my mastermind group. And I actually met Anna here on LinkedIn, which I think is really interesting and very special. And so it's such an honor to welcome Anna in today to talk about work-life balance, work-life integration. She's got extensive experience helping both individuals and organizations. You know, she does a lot of work with businesses as well. Helping them through some of the pillars that I'm sure she'll talk through in, or one pillar in particular in the book, her book around Outside the 9 to 5, around work-life integration. So welcome.
Thank you so much, Chloe. Yeah, it's been such a pleasure to follow your journey as well. It's funny how these things work out. It's always nice to hear when people have followed you on LinkedIn, because it means that something is working, something's brought us together, and loving working with you more closely. I love, obviously, the work that you do. There's so many synergies. So hopefully our discussion today will bring some interesting insights for your audience, as it will to mine as well. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I think we also, I remember back in the kind of Clubhouse days, I think we also I saw you through that as well. And it's beautiful seeing the kind of journey that you've been on. I actually read your first book, which was part of my move out. So it's amazing to be friends now as well. So today we are talking about work-life balance. And I wanted to start with having a bit of a conversation around, perhaps what work-life balance means for you, and if you, I assume, share the same questionable dislike for the concept and why.
Yeah, so I like the idea of it. I suppose I was thinking back, so much has changed, and it's interesting, just over the time that I've known you and since I wrote that book, my life just looks completely different. And I was thinking back to my first job. I was at a big multinational corporation, and it was very much the work hard, play hard. I didn't put it into terms of work-life balance, but I was working very hard. We worked late hours, but I loved it. It was exciting with colleagues. We had fun parties. And then actually I did quite a lot. So I did some amateur theatre in my outside of work hours. I did writing courses and obviously traveled and so on. So I think that was a sense of balance. When I initially left my job in 2013, I did consulting for companies, and that was balanced in a different way. So I would do 3 months, 6 months on a contract, and then I'd go off traveling for a few months, and then I'd have another contract. So that's balance, but obviously sort of sequential balance.
Yeah.
However, now that I've thought about this much more, and I'm sure you have as well, I really have an issue with the concept for many reasons, but a couple key ones. The first one is just semantics, that there is the dichotomy of work versus life. Work is a part of life. Yes, it's a really important part of life, and we spend a lot of our time working, and we need to and we want to. However, it is part of life. So even just the concept of putting them in binary terms makes no sense. So that's sort of my technical disagreement. But the second more important one is the implications, that having more of one means less of the other, meaning that usually if you have more life, it means you're compromising on your work ambitions, your employer's disappointed because you're not as invested in your work and so on. Or vice versa, if I choose to focus on my career, it means I'm not going to be a good mother or, be able to pursue my interests and so on. So I think those are my two main concerns with the concept. One, that it just doesn't make sense because work is a part of life, so you can't put the two, in a zero-sum game. And the other is that it's not a question of one or the other. They actually have both positive and negative implications for each other. And so that's, that whole construct for me doesn't make sense, and it's not a helpful one either.
Yeah, I think to add to that, because I totally agree with that. For me, even the concept of work then life, that I have an issue with. And again, you can say it's semantics, but sometimes language is really, really important. So the fact that we're so socialized to use the phrase and the terminology work-life balance, why does work come first? Why does it come first? And exactly to your point around, are they, if I'm not working, am I not alive? Like, it's, and that sounds really silly, but they can be of one, which I is why I'm very intrigued around this concept of work life integration. I think um, that dichotomy, as you've just described, is really tricky, as well as the concept of balance. The word balance, to me, it's like you're walking along a tightrope, and suddenly you're going to be like, oh right, okay, I'm off kilter, or I've completely fallen to the ground and messed up. Or even when, if you think about the scales analogy, that so many people, is synergistic with so many people's perception of what work-life balance is, and what you've described there, that kind of, if you take off a little bit out of one, how the whole thing drops there. Is really accurate? Is that really helpful? I think we're on the same page around that. Interestingly, when I was preparing for this, and I popped on to see, what people's experience has been around work-life balance, and um, there were a number who were coming back saying work-life balance is a challenge. One of the questions that I popped in a poll was like, "Do you dislike the concept?" And actually, no one picked that answer. It was just me. I was like, maybe this is a controversial conversation that we're having, but I think an important one.
But I saw the results. I think a lot of people said they're fairly neutral, and that doesn't seem hugely inspiring. I think, if you feel great about it, that's probably quite rare. If you feel quite negative about it, it's clear to do something about it. But if you're just feeling a bit like, meh, that's a bit troubling to me, I think, and maybe requires a bit of reflection as to what's not quite working, and how can you sort of get a bit of oomph to change something there.
Yeah, and I think the way that you described it is, I said, is it a myth? But actually, the description of it being a fallacy, I think, is also a really, really helpful one. What do you think are some of the kind of misconceptions that exist around work-life balance? I know you talked about some of
Yeah.
them, but are there others that you think, is important for us to be aware of?
Yeah, I think a couple. I mean, for example, as you said, there is no such thing as the perfect balance. I think I've seen some gurus have said the kind of 8-8-8, meaning you work 8 hours, you sleep 8 hours, you have 8 hours for personal. And then I wonder, okay, but laundry and life admin, is that my personal time? Is that like me having fun and me taking care of the kids? And, some people want to work more than that. Some people want to work less than that. I don't think there is that mathematical, it suggests, oh, my screen's gone black. The signal's a bit poor, so I'm not sure if it's on your side or mine. Hopefully I'm coming across okay, Chloe.
You're fine for me.
Good. So that mathematical kind of perfect balance, as you said, it feels like it's got to be like that. And the second thing is that you think it's something to strive for. There's an end goal. Oh, now I have perfect balance. But it's not, as you said, it's a continuous calibration. And I need only look at, the last decade, I suppose, to how I've been adjusting. And it is a continuous, well, the word that came to mind was battle, which feels a bit aggressive, but it's certainly a journey, a struggle. It's a process, right, of trying to get that right. So I think that's not very helpful. More sort of philosophically, I think there are some really damaging beliefs around work-life balance. And I see it a lot in the entrepreneurial space, but also just as I came on, I read about a CEO in America who was telling his organization that they all had to come back into the office, and there's no way, I'm now paraphrasing, but none of you are ever going to work harder than I have. But he said it in much more strong terms. Basically, nobody can outwork me. And someone had sold their dog, and he applauded that as a great sign that they were committed to work, and so on. So there's this assumption, which maybe isn't voiced always in such extreme terms, but again and again I see on LinkedIn, you can only achieve great things if you sacrifice everything else. And I have personal issues with that, because it means I'm resigning myself to an average existence, which is upsetting, and maybe that's okay, maybe that's my lot in life. And also, I just don't think it's true. I think we need to reframe that whole perspective. There's just this really negative stigma about slowing down. People say taking a vacation to look after kids. I've seen that again and again the last few days when you're on maternity leave. It's not really holiday. Taking a sabbatical, all these things that should be normalized, and yet it's seen, I think, as something which is taking a step back from your career. You're choosing not to fulfill your ambitions, and I think that's a huge misconception that I'm getting up on my horse about, and trying to fly the flag of, yes, you can have big ambitions, you can achieve great things without sacrificing your health and your relationships. In fact, you can't achieve great things if you sacrifice those things.
Yeah, yeah. And there's so much of that as well. We see it so much with people waiting for the next holiday. They're like, it's fine. I just need to get through. I just need to get through X, Y, and Z. This next month or whatever, and then I'm going on leave, or I've got, I'm going, and it's just going to be this huge slog to get there. And I've to actually switch off, and I've absolutely um, been done have this had the same mentality, and I don't think it's particularly healthy. And even the last couple of weeks, you'll know, I went on a tech detox, stayed at an unplugged retreat in nature, and went into a cabin in the woods, and it was lovely. And you went in and you put your phone into a box, you locked the box, and you weren't allowed to open the box, and you for the rest of for the 3 days. And before I went on that retreat, I posted about it and shared about it, because I was feeling, because I champion well-being so much, feeling a bit like fraud myself, by being so kind of, I got to that state where I needed to take that rest, or rest all the time. And actually what came through in some of the comments and from people was saying, well, actually, a better way of doing it is actually to, how do you find that moments of rest, or create those boundaries, or create those barriers, like into the everyday, so it's not this kind of one okay, I'm ready, geared up, and then I can and then you get geared down. So as you were saying that, I felt like that was really interesting, and what prompted me to invite you on today was actually coming back from that retreat, doing a scorecard that you had built for some of the entrepreneurs that you work with, to assess the 5 different pillars of life within their of which work life integration is one of them. And I scored lowest on that pillar. And I was like, okay, right, actually, the time is now to be able to do something about it, do something different. So I'm really interested, and rather than have a conversation just you and I thought, well, why don't we bring this to a wider audience, to actually see what your perspective is around that, and your approach around work life integration.
And Chloe, if you don't mind my saying, in that conversation a couple of weeks ago, you shared with me, you kind of challenged me, because you said something along the lines of, I'm here to play big. And there was something underlying which challenged me and challenged you, I think, in terms of, does that mean that if I'm choosing to have more balance and integration, I'm not playing big? And likewise, if you're playing big, does that mean that you can't prioritize your health and well-being and so on, which of course is contrary to your own philosophy? And I think those are the questions we need to be asking. There's no ultimate meaning of life answer to it, but we all need to ask those questions for ourselves. But again, I strongly believe, and I think everyone agrees in theory, at least when we put it down on paper, we need to take care of our mental, physical, emotional health in order to even begin to dream of making a huge impact in the world, right? When you are your business, taking care of yourself is taking care of your business, as the kind of catchy meme goes. And so I think there's so much mindset work to be done around, I can be ambitious and I also need to take care of myself.
Yeah, and that it feels possible. It feels possible, and you can actually experience safety in taking that rest. Sometimes switching off or slowing down really doesn't feel safe for particularly those who are very, very driven. There's a very interesting book called Driven, which talks about that, and I would very much identify with that. It's relearning that, okay, actually, this is so important. Actually, rest can be hard. Rest isn't necessarily easy. You think that it could, it should be easy, because it sort of comes with this, that with the saying, but actually rest is work. And one of my mentors says that you are working because you are rest is your work, Chloe. That is your way to show up, as you say, at your best for all of the people that you serve. I'm curious, for you, when we talk about work life integration, how for you does that differ from work life balance?
Yeah, so just to describe my day today, I woke up quite early and my little 2-year-old has finally started sleeping through the last week, miraculously. I think, I don't know if it's a blip or if it's ongoing, but it meant that I had about an hour, I got a tea, I sat down and did a bit of work in the morning, which I don't usually do, then drove the kids to nursery, went to the gym, did a workout, shower, an hour of work, came back here, had lunch, did some laundry. I'm here with you. The afternoon I'm going to be spending doing a couple of work things. I also need to pack for the weekend and so on, right? So from a purely practical level, that's how today has worked, and every day looks different. In terms of a dictionary definition, it really is what it says on the tin. It's integrating work into life or life into work. So it's more about harmony, and that sounds very idyllic, but it's more about finding synergies and finding a way. For me, it's about showing up as my whole self at work and at home. Work can be fun. Work can, involve rest maybe, and so on. Likewise, home life can also involve being driven in personal endeavors, whether you're running ultra marathons or learning a language or whatever, right? And ultimately, you're the same person. I think sometimes we forget at work that we're human beings, and forget at home, let's say, that a parent is also a coach or consultant or a senior director and so on. And ultimately, it sounds so simple, but we are one and the same person. Again, thinking back to how it's changed for me over the last years, I mentioned when I first started consulting, it was very much work on, then off, then on. That was the balance. And after that, I became the famous digital nomad of taking my work along with me when I traveled. So that was a much more blended, integrated approach. I then met an Englishman who had a job in the city. So I came back and I then fell into more of a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, so that we could spend the evenings and weekends together. I then had a newborn and I ended up doing a lot of calls in the evening because that was when I knew I had, father at home to help out. I knew the baby would be sleeping or there would be someone with him. I can't imagine working that late in the night now. So it's funny how these things go. Then, of course, COVID. And then I managed my work alongside the pandemic and having the 2 kids now at home. And then now we've moved down to Dorset. The kids are at nursery 3 days a week. And I'm managing all my priorities, but I'm managing all the different, juggling all the balls, as they say in my life, around that model. So there's no static image of what it looks like, but the intent is to find a way to be authentically, I know that's an overused word, but authentically you in each of your different areas of life, and not just, there's a work domain and there's trying to squeeze in everything else around it.
Yeah. And I think some of the questions that some of my audience in particular, who are primarily in you're still in corporate roles, 9 to 5, traditional 9 to 5. I think COVID has changed some of that perception, particularly from a lot of more working from home, etc., that has opened up that open up space for more of the integration that you talked about, like doing the washing in the middle of the day. That certainly was something that was such a nice opportunity when certainly when I was still working in corporate in lockdown. It was like, oh, actually this is nice to be able to just do some of the kind of chores that previously would have been stored up to the rest of the day, actually being able to bring them forward and integrate them in, and much more flexibility to think about your own energy levels. But I know, having coaching many people who are still within, well, most people, in fact everyone I still coach, was still within a corporate space, or with what would have been considered a traditional 9 to 5. From that perspective, what advice or what strategies or what things that you would you tell them to be able to help them integrate more work life or life work?
Yeah, I think from the big picture, a few things. The first is to get clear on, I talk about defining success for you. In this case, maybe it's defining what work-life integration looks like for you, whether you're single or in a partnership, if you have, or what your family looks like, whether it's children or aging parents and so on, animals, and, what your lifestyle looks like. And that's another piece of the integration, I think, really thinking together, because ultimately it's not just your careers, it's perhaps also your partner's career. And if his or hers is, or theirs is less flexible, more flexible, and so on, right? But really getting clear on, hang on, what do I actually want? The second is to make choices intentionally to support that vision. And that probably means choosing an employer who shares those values, who supports you in those endeavors, right? And we'll talk about what organizations can do in a moment. And then it really means being intentional about how you're spending your time and energy then. And it's up to you ultimately to set those boundaries, to say no to certain things, to plan your life basically in a way that matches your vision. It sounds very easy, but those are sort of the big building blocks in terms of get clear what you want, make choices to support that, and then day to day, you know, find ways that work for you.
Yeah. And I think that I really agree with those. What I would add to it is I think there's some belief work for people often, and it's not necessary to say that every organization has that approach, or every line manager will, be as open as others. However, my experience has been that so many people will write off these things as not being possible without even asking the question, or without even opening the conversation around, hey, this is what would really help me, because I want to be with, my I want to be with, to pick my kid up from school. I want to be there for that period of time. I'll work in the evening. I'll manage my day accordingly so that I get the stuff done, I get the work done, I get the outcomes, I achieve the outcomes and what needs to be done, but not necessarily in a traditional way. There are examples, obviously, around that uh, i- that have very heavily been linked to motherhood or parenthood.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's so much opportunity. I remember when I was starting pop, and I had all these ideas, and I was working on it I was working on it in outside of my 9 to 5. I was working on it on weekends and um, evenings and weekends. And as it was growing, and as the ideas and the workload that was coming alongside that was growing, I remember sitting there thinking and looking at some of the parents within the organization and thinking, oh gosh, I wish I could have just one day a week, as they would have for childcare, that I could look after my flourishing baby, which was Pop. um, and then I suddenly asked myself, well, why could that not be true for me? What what could be possible if I asked the question of
Mm.
my organization? What could be possible? You know, could I? Long story short, I then went down to 4 days a week and then 3 days a week, and the organization was unbelievably supportive the whole way through. And yes, perhaps that's testament to my line manager, but they they I don't think it necessarily needs to be true. They weren't offering it to me. If they'd come to me and said, Chloe, I think you should go down to a 4 day week, I probably would have been offended
Mm.
by that conversation. And I see it with so many clients where they're saying, oh, I can't go for a swim in the middle of the day because swimming takes 2 hours. I'm like, is that really true? Is that really true that you can't go for a swim in the middle of the day? And when they've unpicked that and kind of lent into the discomfort of, all right, okay, well, I will, find a way to make that happen. Wow, the way that they are then able to show up at work is so, 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 so different. Um, so I think there's that belief piece around, where are we shutting ourselves down from thinking that these things are not possible for us and only possible in entrepreneurial world or with
Mm.
parents or whatever it looks like. How can we create that for ourselves and think a little bit differently outside the box in order to make that happen or possible?
Yeah, I just saw someone last week again. I'm so immersed in this now on LinkedIn. Once you start commenting and seeing things, you see a whole world open up, which is amazing. But there was someone who's a nurse who does 6 months a year of nursing, and then she travels the
Yeah.
rest of the year. I work a lot with FMCG because that's my background, and leaders who said, actually, we question this. And even in the plant, even the factories, they were able to, a lot of the roles were able to move to more flexible working. So, and exactly as you said, there's a mindset for us as high achievers being driven is this even something I want? And it's funny that, yeah, if somebody came to you and said, oh, do you want to work a bit less? You take that as an offense, which is, a problem in itself in a way, right? Even though that could be quite empowering. But then actually asking the question, I was just asked to contribute to an article in the FT this week where there was a question in the column, oh, I've got this job and I want this other job, but it's less flexible. And without knowing all the details, you have to ask, but hang on a second, have you asked the question? And not to say that, as you said, everybody will say yes, but actually, like you, I've had a lot of clients who've asked, and yes, they have been able to do those things. So, we often project the no because of our own limiting beliefs and thinking it's not going to be possible. And actually, there are a lot of, that's the whole beauty of integration. There are lots of creative ways of asking, of managing things in different ways, of finding more nuanced solutions that are maybe in between those black and white binary options that we thought were the only extremes on the table.
Yeah. And do you have any kind of practical tips around that, around the work-life integration? I know that you've got lots developed from the tool perspective and what you work on there, but is there anything that you think, all right, actually that would be really valuable for someone to experience or look at it in a different way? I'm curious.
Yeah, well, I guess a couple of tools. The first one is mine, which is what I call the 5 Ls. I like a bit of alliteration. I developed it back in my digital nomad days. I was at a digital nomad conference and was looking for a way to illustrate the different areas of life. So that's one of the misconceptions. Again, there is work and there is life. No, there are lots of other things. And for me, the 5 Ls then, and we can share this afterwards in the comments as well, if you want to grab a pen and paper if you're listening. Live, love, learn, lead, laugh. So live is your health and well-being, which is, the things that we think of: physical health, mental health, drinking lots of water, after this call, I'm going to go for a walk because it's a beautifully sunny day and so important to be out in nature and fresh air and all those obvious things. Sleep. So your health and well-being, that's the first L. The second one is love. And I don't only mean romance, but relationships, professional, personal, a sense of belonging. Obviously, we've come out of this quite lonely time the last few years and really sensing that kind of connection. I know a lot of companies are concerned about the company culture and so on. So having that sense of belonging. Learn, for me, is development and growth, which I know we share that passion for lifelong learning and many people do. Again, personal, professional development. Lead, which is your career, but not just clocking in and clocking out, but actually how you can make a difference. And then the hardest one is laugh, which is very hard to set goals in, which is fun and spontaneity. I know it seems really odd to plan spontaneity, but having some space on the calendar, whatever it is for you. Eve Rodsky, I'm a huge fan. She's written a book called Find Your Unicorn Space. And she talks about this magical place where we can express ourselves and be creative. And there's a lot of kind of questioning Maslow's hierarchy and kind of tipping it on its head and saying, no, hang on a second, but certainly this piece of self-actualization needs to be a bit lower down. That's really important. So for me, those 5 Ls are a way of looking at success and looking at your life, I suppose, in a more balanced way, but really thinking of those different areas. It's not just, okay, this is my job and then this is my life. The reality is there are so many elements to you and so many elements to both work and to play and to life and personal life and so on. So that's one model. And then very concretely, and I think I read it from Michael Hyatt, who in turn got it from someone else, the idea of having an ideal week is actually, I take those 5 Ls and map out, again, it sounds quite idealistic, but if I had full control of my time, how would I spend it?
Yeah.
And, you mentioned, yes, owning my own business, I have full autonomy, more or less, over how I spend my time. In my final corporate role, I had a very autonomous role where I was almost like an internal consultant. And there too, I was focused on the outcomes. I was focused on the results. I had, certain things I wanted to achieve. I had the freedom to spend a week immersing myself with an agency. I'd create training programs, in a way, things I do now, but within an employed scenario. And so I think, hinting at what organizations can do, there's an element of trust and empowering your employees to deliver the results, but find a way to do that more creatively, right? But anyway, the ideal week, you can map out one calendar for work and for pleasure and everything else, right? And really look. So if I want to exercise, and that's been a struggle for me as a mother, but I've now been working with a trainer the last 2 years, I'll sit every week and look at my calendar. Okay, I'm doing nursery drop off there, or I have an early call that day. When can I shift my run, or, can I squeeze that in somewhere else? So mapping out those 5 Ls that I've just talked about, your exercise, your breaks, date night with your partner, meeting your friends, connecting with your colleagues, whatever it is, right? Family time and so on, and mapping that out. So those are my very concrete tools, having goals and priorities in different areas of your life. And then secondly, actually translating those goals into tangible blocks on your calendar. And of course, your week is never going to be like that ideal week, but it's, something that you can check in every week and see, hang on a second, I was being maybe a little bit optimistic there, or oof, I've not done this at all. Where can I make tweaks? How can I prioritize the things that I say are priority for me, and perhaps make more space for them in my calendar?
Yeah, and it's the work life the calendar, the ideal week calendar is reminding me of one from Jesse Itzler. If you're familiar with, he does a process at the beginning of the year where he plans out the entire year. I know he has a big calendar that supports you to do that, and a process that supports you to do that, to really look and map out before the work, because so many of us will say, like, okay, we'll fit our holidays or whatever it is around our work. His process or thought process, from what I understand of it, is to actually flip it and say, what do I want my life component to look like? What are the things that I really want to achieve or experience? What are the and how do I map that space out first before building in anything else? And I know it's idealized, and it's not easy to do, but it's such a useful such a valuable tool, and when you schedule it actually happens, or it's much more likely to happen. The other thing that I think is, and you touched on there, is really valuable, is around, like, who can support you and who can help you um, with those things. You mentioned the personal trainer as an example of that. I talk about POP being the support crew for leaders. Like, that wasn't an intention to create a support crew to be able to, because we navigate so much of our lives alone. Actually, we're social humans, and we are so much more likely to achieve or do the things that we say we do if we formalize some of those accountability pieces. So the who, I think, is in your support crew, and elite athletes have a support crew around them. So coaches, mentors, cheerleaders, peers who are training buddies, etc. Who are those people or equivalents in your own life to be able to support you to show up and show up and keep you accountable to those things that you say that you are important to you. I always look to my team to be able to do that. So trying to help use them, or not use them, but encourage them to keep me accountable to saying, right, I'm going to do my best to actually take some break here and start at 11, because for tonight I've got a Coles. I'm delivering with Coles at midnight till 2 a.m. essentially with Coles. So I needed to make sure that my morning was kind of completely relaxed and free to be able to and catch up on a bit of sleep, as you say, is important. So the who, I think, is really, really important.
Just a couple of things. I mean, the calendar piece, to reiterate there, it might sound scary to plan the whole year. At least for me, it feels like, but there's the proactivity. It's being, not reactive. We live so much, I teach like a sort of time management 101 for junior managers, and it's about, so many of us live in our inbox and we just respond. We open up our email in the day, and then that's our day. Even, I'm certainly no perfect guru. On Monday, I had this one priority I wanted to do. And I said, I'll just do this one other thing first. And then, of course, one other thing. By the end of the day, I hadn't done the thing. So it's just being proactive about, actually holding yourself accountable. Yeah. And in terms of support crew, I have a little sort of alphabet that I use with my clients, and accountability is the first one. Holding you accountable to your goals and to taking breaks and so on as well. B is belief, having people who believe in you and support you and cheer you on. C, community, we talk about that, and it might not be your immediate peer group, because maybe you're working.
I've lost you.
Just lost you. Hope we're back. If you're working in a really high performance organization, then it might be that the people around you, it's a bit of the emperor's new clothes, share connecting.
You're
Did you
dropping
hear
off
me?
for me a little bit, Anna. I'm not sure whether it's
Okay.
me or whether it's you, but
I'm not sure
um,
either. You've been dropping off a little. So I was just saying, so A, B, C, D, E. So accountability, belief, community, people
yeah,
around you supporting you. D, disconnecting. That's where people around you who kind of don't care about the work you do is quite helpful. And whether it's booking in to go to a spa with friends, or I now do tennis and racquetball coaching, and it's just people who don't know even what I do, let
yeah,
alone ask me anything about my work at all, which is quite nice. And then E, experts, as you said, having people. So I've worked with a personal trainer, nutritionist for the last couple of years, and you could work with a business mentor or a therapist, whatever area you want to be focusing on. So that's my little sort of, I know it seems a bit scientific to say, oh, you need all these different types of support, but actually having almost like a personal board of advisors to support you in different ways, and not expecting, I can't expect my partner to both cheer me on and hold me accountable and help me disconnect. And, it's just too much for one person. I think we
yeah.
saw that during the pandemic. So now if we can find those different sources of support, that's really helpful.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Is that for me, everything, the foundation of success is awareness, or awareness is the foundation of success. Like if you are aware of where you're at, so for instance, using your tool around the 5 Ls, or I've got a similar tool which I call me we be, which is
Mm,
um, really brings your awareness to where am I right now, and where do the shifts need to be on this. So for instance, for your tool, it would be kind of, how might I be, experiencing love or
mm,
learning, like how much would that be, how would I rate myself there. But then utilizing that information, who can help me and what might help me able to do that,
mm,
because you're right, we can't lean on our partner for everything. um, and nor can we, nor should we. uh, there are better people who are a better place to be able to do that, and some of
mm,
it also is around the organization. And I know that we want to, and I'd love to have a bit of a conversation with you around how the organizations can better help support their um, support their employees and support their people. And that could be from the organization as a whole perspective, or it could be the from kind of, if I'm a line manager or a team leader, how might I be able to support and empower that. That's another piece of the who that I think is really important in terms of the crew. So often we can see that as being kind of external, or there's no, actually that sits within the who that can help you. Um, and if you're not getting that support, there's obviously ways to challenge your own thinking and ask for it. Or if it's not the right fit, then um, actually just before we jumped on this, I was looking at um, the survey. Who was it from? It's Business Insider survey. It was the number one people. Oh no, sorry, it was the Microsoft Works Trend study that looked at the number two reason why people were quitting was because they were stating work-life balance as a reason that they were quitting. So there's such an importance. The first one was around personal well-being and health. So there's such an importance from an organization perspective around how do you support. It's not just
mm,
disempowering and saying, okay, right, that's in their remit. Their life remit is their life remit
mm,
to be able to support there. And the other piece was around was from the Business Insider, which the article that basically did some research that said actually work-life balance came above pay in terms of importance for people, in terms of importance and why they were choosing organizations. So I'm curious, maybe just as we start to close down the conversation, what can teams and organizations do to, or team leaders do to support their people in this space?
mm. So you're right. It is a really important issue to deal with, right? It's something that has implications for reputation of a company. Now in the world of social media, people are sharing, and all these youngsters are sharing on TikTok their complaints about different companies. I've heard anecdotally things that are, I won't even share now, in terms of companies and how they have a very traditional mindset in some cases as to what's right and what's not. Another stat I saw a few minutes before coming on was 2/3 of women would be more keen to progress in a company if they
Yeah.
saw better work-life balance in senior leaders, right? If we look up and we don't see leaders who we aspire to be, then that's when, especially again, Generation Z and beyond are going to be much more willing to leave, and that has huge implications for the organization. I think there are three levels at which we need to address it. One is the individual, exactly as you said, and the team is the second, and the third is the big organizational systematic piece, right? So at the individual level, the organization can support individuals to do these things that we're talking about, to find fulfillment, to work out, maybe provide coaching. I'm working with one company that gives their employees a £5,000 budget a year, and a lot of them will spend it on courses and so on. But perhaps we were talking about maybe there's an element of coaching there that would be interesting to take this time, take a step back, and really get clear on what's important, your values, your purpose that we talk about, what would fulfilling work look like for you, and then support the individual. You said support and empower, which sounded really valuable, to support and empower the individual to live their best life. I know that's the kind of blah blah that coaching people talk about, but that's what we want to do. So there's the individual piece, and of course having a clear work plan and so on. There's the team piece around processes and again, clear roles and responsibilities and communication. And for more junior people, it might be more of a kind of manager 101, time management, how do you run an effective meeting and so on. Depends where the organization is, right? Some that I talk to already have all those hygiene factors in place, and they're really looking at more advanced strategies now, and others might still need to do some of the more basic work at the team level. And then at the organization wide level, it is of course most obviously having those flexible working policies. And there are so many options now. I've met someone who has a 9-day fortnight, which means every other Friday is off. Which she finds works really well. Obviously there's working remotely, working from home, there's job share, part-time and so on. So that's the basic. But then there's as we've danced around, the mindset, the culture, senior leaders role modeling these behaviors. There's the element of psychological safety and trust. There's really empowering your people to do their best work. I mean, the example that I heard years ago was this, Google gave their people 20% of their time that Friday to work on any project they wanted. What happened? They came up with Gmail and all these incredible things, right? So we all know Dan Pink's drive, autonomy, mastery, purpose. These are things that drive us. And so, there are a lot of angles. And I think for anyone listening, if you're looking to make change in the organization, you can think about where are the gaps for us. Above all, it's about listening, because your people are telling you what they want, and it's up to you to really listen to that and then to act on it. Because as we all know, we've all filled in those employee surveys and then nothing has actually happened, and then there's an element of trust being lost as well. But there are, there's the mindset piece, there's empowering, trusting our people, and there is, the actual tangible skills of being able to manage in a hybrid environment and so on. So there are a lot of things to do for the organization. I appreciate that, but it is an exciting time, because if you can get this right, or at least if you can move in the right direction, you're going to stand out. You're going to attract the top talent. You're going to retain those people. It's going to ultimately, in the longer term, and I know we're in a very difficult economic environment, but ultimately is going to help your employees thrive, and therefore help your organization thrive as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up Dan Pink's, or Daniel Pink's work around. He does lots of studies around intrinsic motivation. You mentioned some of them there, and that purpose piece completely is transformational, as well as the autonomy. What you've just described in your own workday was having the autonomy to be able to go and shape out what do you want that work life to be, that's going to enable you to show up, at your best, or to achieve, to achieve what you need to get done in the day, what's going to enable you to step up into that. I think the autonomy piece is really, really, really key, and the purpose too. So organizations, I I work with a number of organizations who are really helping individuals get really deep into understanding what's their purpose, because we all have one. We all have one, or certainly I follow Simon Sinek's methodology, or use his methodology with the work that I do. We all have one, and that's what we look at like at our best. And actually, if you're empowering your people with an understanding of what that is for them, they're going to be able to show up in both work and their life in a way that's aligned with who they are, so they're feeling motivated. And it's that sustainability of that motivation, I think, is really, really important. That, sometimes I do worry that I don't have the work-life balance, or the integration right, partly is because I absolutely love
Mm.
what I'm doing. Like, I am so lit up by everything that I am building, creating, the support that, I am so lit up by that, that work doesn't feel like work. And it doesn't, I believe that you don't have to have, and I work with so many individuals who are in organizations who are kind of like, oh, need to leave in order to find that. I'm like, you don't need to leave in order to
Mm.
find that. It's really hard to start your own business and do your own thing. Actually, how do you try and find that within where you are and create that, so that you don't work more because you're more motivated to do it, but definitely enjoy and feel more fulfilled in what you're doing. So I think
Mm.
that's yeah,
But it's
great
so
addition.
inspiring. It's so beautiful to hear that, and I share that too. And I think that's why the magical balance doesn't exist, because if you find that work that you love to do, it doesn't feel draining. In fact, it gives you energy. And sometimes if someone starts, a side hustle or a creative project alongside their work, ironically, even though it's adding more to their plate, it somehow rejuvenates them, gives them that spark again. And even though you're doing more sort of in terms of hours, it re-energizes them at work as well. However, one thing we haven't talked about is sort of the dark side of integration. I think sometimes
Mm,
people think integration in terms of blending and worse bleeding into one and the other. I think, speaking from experience, the danger is when we say, oh, it doesn't matter that I'm working all the time because I love it so much. First of all,
yes.
that's dangerous if the employer has that feeling, oh, but you're so connected to your purpose that you can work weekends and late nights and that's fine. So one, setting boundaries, it's such a big topic that we talk about, but for me, we're living in kind of a temporary setup here, so I don't quite have the capability to do it, but in theory, turning down, shutting down your laptop, closing the door to your study, having boundaries. I need to tell my clients, I don't work on these days. I did get a bit stressed the other day because somebody was saying, oh, can you do a phone call on a Saturday? I'm like, Saturday? No, I can't do Saturdays, or, oh, I've got the kids on Tuesdays, whatever it
Yeah.
is. But the boundaries that work for you. And for you, I was like you too. I don't want to sound like an old lady when I was young, but when I was traveling and I could also work, I did my coaching certification at 3 a.m. because I was in Hawaii at the time, and that was just the time zone, and that was fine. It just looks a bit different to me now. But first of all, set boundaries. And then secondly, whatever you're doing, just be intentional about it. You're doing this because you're choosing to lean in. It's the early stages of your work. You're passionate about it. Your lifestyle allows for that. Now, yes, you still have to be careful, and you are taking those digital detoxes and breaks,
Yeah.
and you need to be wary of that. But you can lean in. That's why, it is this kind of dance, and it's, even my 5Ls, I have kind of a scorecard for it, but it's not about getting 10 out of 10 on every one, which, the good girl in me wants to get 10 out of 10. It's about saying, you know what, right now I'm single and that's not a worry for me. I'm going to focus on my business or
Yeah.
my, career with this project, or I'm going to run these ultra marathons, whatever it is. Or, right now, oh my gosh, I'm planning for my wedding, or I'm trying to doing IVF, whatever it is. And that means that that's my priority. And maybe some other things need to take the back seat. And it's about making those choices intentionally. And for me, it's about being present. So I'm not trying to work when I'm with the kids, even the easy stuff. And I find myself doing it now and then, just reply to this Instagram. But right away I catch myself, and I really try not to do that. Likewise, when I'm working, yes, I talk about doing laundry, but I try to be present. I'm not going to, obviously, in the middle of the live, go off and do something personally. But likewise, I do try to still have time
Yeah.
blocks within that. So just to say, integration doesn't mean no boundaries, and it doesn't mean that you have to have 10 out of 10 on everything. You can choose to lean in one direction or another, as long as you're choosing it, as long as you're doing that eyes open intentionally. Look, right now, this particular area is not a priority. And then you maybe check in a few months, and maybe that has changed. So just be intentional about the choices you're making would be my final thought.
Yeah. I think I that point's really landed with me, especially from a boundaries perspective. And so I'm definitely going to be taking that away and leaning into your support around holding me accountable to some of those boundaries too, because you're right. When you're so passionate about something, it can get easy to blur the lines, and it's not it's not sustainable. I'm all about creating leaders that last. I want to
Mm.
be a leader that lasts in terms of people's memory and, makes a difference and leaves a legacy, but also one who doesn't burn out myself, who is there for the long term, who is sustainable. Um, Such a valuable conversation. Before we end, Is there anything else that you wanted to share? I know that that sounded like one of your last points, but I want to give you opportunity to say any final words before we close out. Um, yeah.
Oh, thanks so much. Well, I've loved your questions, and it's always, that there's no right or wrong answer here, and we all have different perspectives. Again, my own view has changed so much. As I said, when I wrote the book that you talked about, leaving the corporate 9 to 5, I was fresh out of the corporate world, and I was very much into sort of the values of freedom and autonomy and traveling by myself and so on. And my life looks very different now with a young family and sort of building our dream home and taking the business more seriously and maybe being more settled and so on. So I think that the biggest message I can leave you with is just, as we just said, be intentional. Take the time, take a step back to think about, maybe some of the questions we've asked, maybe reflect on some of the beliefs that you have around, I couldn't possibly, that's not, just ask the hypothetical question, what if, what could that look like? Just start to probe a little bit. And just very tangibly, I think we talked about this 5 hours in the assessment. If you are interested, just if you want to comment balance, I know we've said balance doesn't exist, but it's an easy word. If you comment balance, then we can ping that over to you. It's just a PDF where it asks some questions around these different areas. If you're an entrepreneur, I know we're talking more about employees here. Chloe mentioned the scorecard, so I have that resource as well. So just let me know if you want that as well. But yeah, I hope the conversation was valuable. I'm passionate about this, as you can tell, as Chloe is as well. I think it's such an interesting area, and so much is happening now with companies, with individuals, and there's so many questions to be asking, let alone finding the right answers to them. So hopefully we're contributing to that discussion and moving in the right direction.
Absolutely, yes. So balance in the comments if you want to get your hands on Anna's resource for free. Thank you so much for sharing that with the community. And if you're not already connected with Anna or myself, feel free to do that. We absolutely love, well, I certainly loved responding to everyone on LinkedIn, getting to know those who are within the community. I would also love to hear what your takeaways are from this session. So please do share them in the chat. I often think and say and encourage when we run these sorts of workshops that actually often the value can come from other people's shares, and the summary that could come out of that I think is really, really empowering. So if you want to contribute something today, you don't know who you might be able to help with that comment that you leave there. So thank you so much, Anna, for your time. And thank you, everyone who joined us live or anyone who's watching back on the playback. It has been so valuable.
Thanks so much, Chloe.